It's record store day, and thousands of you are flocking to your local stores to buy some new vinyl. But how does music get from a recording to a final product that you consume? There are three main steps in creating a record. First, there's recording, and then there's mixing, where the mixing engineer balances the levels of the recorded audio. Finally, there's mastering, where the record is finalised and checked over before going to the factory. I'm here to see Sean Magee, a mastering engineer who has worked on albums by Pink Floyd, the Beatles, and the Sex Pistols.
You can candy code it any way you like, but it's, at the end of the day, we move audio from a studio master to a factory master. It must have the right codes on it. Start marks must be in the right place. There must be no clicks or nastiness in between the tracks, and all the tracks must roughly be at the same, the same level. So you're not running up and down, adjusting the volume. And the factory manufacture however many tens of thousands or whatever, first time without any problems. So that's a factory master. So we've literally just cut the side onto there, and then the factory would then take this, they would silver it, and with electrolysis they would grow a negative from that. The amount of time I spend cutting is probably about 70, somewhere between 70 and 80% of my time at the moment. I think it's a far more interesting way of listening to music. I think they noticed this a number of years back. Kids were listening to 7 inches of the listening posts, and they were buying those rather than the downloads. It's sort of ritualistic to play it, doesn't it? You have to have a sort of reverence for it because it's, you could damage it, and it's a bit more interesting. When you buy it, you're buying something a bit more tangible than some ones and zeros. Vinyl is an analog process, but there is vinyl that are cut from digital sources. That's an interesting point. People get confused with that. Is it the best sound ever? If the music on the record is the music I like, then it's the best sounding thing. A good record is a good record, and a good CD is a good CD. You can't say like, oh, CDs sound better than records, because they're not records. They're different. Good mixes equals good mastering. If the majority of the work with how something sounds has been done in the studio, and that's down to the producer and the mix engineer. When that mix is exactly right, then it comes into the mastering room, and then if they're happy with it and it sounds all right and there's not got to be any problems with it, then why do anything? Because if it isn't broke, then you don't need to fix it. You have to decide when it's time to open the toolbox and start doing stuff. Particularly when you're doing remastering. We did all the Beatles remastering, and you can do an awful lot to it, make it sound completely different, and modernise it, and polish it, and do this and do that. But should you? No. People are used to it sounding in a particular way. You fix stuff that they probably would have fixed themselves if they could have done. That's the kind of criteria. If it's acoustic and it was recorded, then it's part of the session. But if it was a buzz or a click or a noisy edit or something like that, if they could have done it better than they would have done, then you kind of do that. We took clicks out, and then some of them we put them back in again. See, the high-res audio with vinyl is an interesting point. My cutting lathe can only cut a certain amount of frequency content because that's all it's designed to do. And so no matter how high the sample rate is that you throw onto a vinyl, at around 20-something kilohertz, it disappears because it's not physically able to cut it. You can't physically play it back, and you can't physically hear it. So, and there's a considerable amount of noise thrown into the mix to sort of smear it all up. But it's still nice. High-res audio in general, it's not a bad thing at all, really. It's actually getting you nearer the analog sound, which is quite amusing, really. Digital was supposed to take over, and now all these new digital formats and higher sample rates are getting nearer and nearer an analog sound and the analog sound they already had. When you're first starting out, because you're full of the joys of spring, and you're going to take over the world, it was, boom, I'm going to throw EQ at it. And if I've done that, right, I've done that, I don't like that, so what I'll do is I'll take that out, and then I'll put that in and do this and that. And what I should have done was just do that. It's an age thing, it's what wisdom of the experience. Is like, well, why should you work too hard really doing something that you shouldn't really need to do? And it's great when you have an album that you don't have to do any work to, because you get to sit with the artist listening to his album, and you're one of the first people to ever hear it as an album, and you can listen to it as music as opposed to listening to it as sound. That is great. That's worth, it's worth everything. You sit there with the artist listening to his album for the first time as an album, because he's only ever heard it in bits, with all the gaps and stuff like that. Privilege, that is. Yeah.